In this video, we're going to play a game in a little segment that I'm going to call Spot the Problem. So there was a very tongue-in-cheek tweet on Twitter just recently of this picture here. Now, the tweet reads, "Kids cycling on the pavement, why on earth did they do this?" Now, of course, this resulted in a flurry of tweets against the poster, without really realising what he was actually saying. Now, if you haven't spotted it, there are two children cycling on the footpath on the opposite side of the road from the picture perspective taken. However, one person replied, pointing out the Volkswagen red van that's parked on the cycle lane on the left-hand side of the road, and decided to put a big blue circle around it and say that might be why, with an arrow just in case you missed the blue circle. Someone else just posted a close-up picture of that same vehicle. Someone else even took the time to edit the vehicle out of the photograph altogether, leaving behind a green checkbox saying, "Here you go, all better." Somebody else decided to use yellow to make it stand out, to point at the same vehicle and say, "There's one reason with a big yellow arrow for you." Someone else replied in kind, providing another example, saying, "I saw this yesterday in Tooting. Owners of a new burger place unscrewed a cycle lane bollard so they could park their promo vehicles there all night." And I think you can even still see the bollard just there in the curb. Someone else also responding to the first photograph said, "Well, funny you focus on that without showing the reason, which is quite clear in your pic. I guess you don't cycle." But it turns out the poster apparently does cycle and supports cycle lanes in his tweet here, saying 100% he supports cycle lanes. "It's why I've been campaigning for several years to get cycle lanes in my town, specifically on this road. I posted the pic to show exactly why kids cycle on the pavement, or worse, don't cycle at all." Now, this is just bringing the conversation to light because I love cycling, but as a cyclist, there's probably nothing more dangerous than having to swerve around obstacles into the main lane and flow of traffic when there is a cycle lane which you're supposed to be in and all the drivers are going to expect you to be in, but they're not going to be looking at the obstacles that you have to avoid and therefore move out into the lane to avoid said obstacles. The only alternative to swerving into the lane would be to slow down, stop even, to gradually move your way around the obstacle to avoid vehicles approaching you from the rear. Because of course those vehicles are not going to be looking out for the obstacles that you are looking for, but you have to get past them nonetheless. So there's nothing more frustrating as a cyclist when you've got car after car that is parking in the cycle lane, taking up this space, because after all, it's an advisory cycle lane, so they always get away with it, quite frankly. So if it was a mandatory cycle lane, then they could be fined for parking in the cycle lane, and then cyclists would be much better off in the cycle lane. But even saying that, this cycle lane doesn't really seem wide enough anyway, because with the new rules, there's got to be a minimum of 1.5 meters up to speeds of 30 miles an hour, and you should be leaving more space than that if it's faster roads. But this cycle lane is certainly not 1.5 meters wide, and vehicles are probably going to be driving along the very edge of that cycle lane, not therefore leaving the minimum required distance. So whilst I found the Twitter thread quite entertaining, it did bring to the forefront this discussion of cycle lanes yet again, because if drivers want cyclists to be out of the road and there is actually a cycle lane, then we should be keeping that cycle lane free. As many people say, you can't have it both ways. You can't have cyclists out of your lane whilst other drivers are parking in the cycle lane. So I suppose this is a polite request on behalf of all cyclists to drivers to please not park in the cycle lanes and hopefully make the roads more tolerable for all of us. Please remember to like this video and subscribe, and as always, thank you for watching.